Director Ann Shaw of the Howard County Historical Society. We are so excited to welcome you to the 2023 Hall of Legends event. This year, like every year, we have 6 amazing people to tell you about who have either made an impact here in Howard County, who are from Howard County and have made an impact elsewhere. Please join us as we sit back and listen to their stories.
My name is Lance Washington, Dr. Lance Washington. I'm an internist. I've been in Kokomo since 1996. I was in private practice for several years until the last couple of years, and I became an employee of community. In addition to being a physician where I do primary care, I also areas of expertise, long-term care medicine. I'm a medical director of a couple of nursing homes. I'm also regional director for Southern Care Hospice. I've been doing that for well over a decade, and one of my actually true loves. I always tell patients it's quite frankly one of my favorite ways to help my patients go to Jesus. I'm from England originally. I've been in this country since 1979. Mom and dad are Jamaican. They left Jamaica in the actually after Jamaica got its independence from England. They went to England. We stayed there till 79, a myriad of reasons, double-digit unemployment. When I came here when I was 13, I went to high school, then went to Northwestern undergrad. I got a bachelor's degrees in environmental and chemical engineering. I went to Boston, worked for Polaroid for a short stint, and then I always knew I wanted to get back into go to medical school. So I left my job I was a process engineer for Polaroid in Walton, Massachusetts. Then I went to the University of Michigan, did 4 years there, and then at Michigan State did my residency at Michigan State. And so with the search companies, they found an opportunity in Kokomo. I don't know anything about Kokomo. I knew it was kind of close to Indy, which is kind of close to Chicago. So I went, joined a practice with, at that time it's called Kokomo Internal Medicine. At the time, there were 2 physicians, Dr. Carl Kingsley and Dr. Lynette Hazelbaker. Dr. Dusty Reed, sister, and Dr. Ilyas Hussein, God rest his soul, brother, joined. And then the 3 of us, the group splintered, and we joined Dr. Tatneo, and the rest is history. My childhood in England, it was wonderful. Mom was an OB nurse, actually as a midwife. And in England, they call nurses or the head nurse sister. Dad has always worked in hospital kitchens. He's a cook. England, school started differently. We started school at 3. And then what we would consider primary and secondary school, which is high school. You graduate when you're 15. You either go to a 2-year college or you go to university. You take these tests called A-levels and O-levels. I don't know if they offer those anymore. Our lives consisted of church. It's an organization called the Boys Brigade, which literally is it's a very, very Christianified version of the Boy Scouts. We'd play football, what Americans call soccer, cricket. I never really experienced racism. You have to understand that in England, it's class-based, it's economic differentiation as opposed to color, because England is such a melting pot. I mean, the guys who lived next to us, they were from Greek and Cyprus. The people across the street were from southern France, and then every other person was either from southern India or from Kazakhstan, or what was considered East Germany, some of the old USSR. So everybody, I mean, it was more, everyone went to the same schools. It wasn't really a big deal. I mean, we all went to the same church. There are no black churches. Everyone would go to the Church of England. I didn't understand that concept. I had to learn that concept when I came to America. I met Little Wife when we were both students at Michigan. She was a nursing student. It was on the 7th floor. And she was wearing this white dress. And I'm like, who is that? I'm like, oh. And her cousin worked there. And I'm like, tell me about Lisa. And Lisa's very quiet, always been very, very quiet. Everyone will tell you, always smiling. In fact, my brother calls her Smiley. And then I try to be very casual. I said, why don't we kind of go out and hang out as friends? And Little Wife would tell me, friends? Psst. at our first date, and I was a little nervous, and so I was just reciting some second order partial differential equations and some linear systems, matrices, and she's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm just showing you how to, how you can, it's called Boolean algebra, how you can, if you take a differential equation and then change it." But anyway, my point being, that's exactly what her response was. She's like, "I'm out on a date with a geek." And so at the end of the date, it was just, I had a good time. Didn't kiss her. I was trying to be appropriate. And apparently that pissed her off. And so I didn't know. I wanted to be very, very kind. Our relationship progressed, and then we started dating long distance. At that time, I met Lisa when our son, Jesse, was 3 or 4. And I never thought I'd ever date a woman who had a child. But I mean, Jesse's a good kid, a wonderful, no one could ask for a better son. I didn't understand what STEP was until I came to this country. I'm like, STEP, that makes it seem secondary. You married someone who has kids, they're your kids. Yes, they have another parent, blah, 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 but they are your kids. And to differentiate them as STEP, I've never liked that, I never will. And so, little wife and I dated for a long time, because I'm like, okay, I'm only doing this once. And so we dated for 6-7 years, and then we got married in 2000. The girls came a couple years later, Mumu, Anissa, who's 21, going to be 21, and then Banan. Her name is Milan, she's 18. I really think I made an impact on some of my patients. It would take me several hours to discuss the stories I've heard from my patients. I've helped them, their kids, and I don't want that glory. I give all that adulation to God, but you know what? I'd be lying to you if I said it didn't. It does. It makes you feel good. You feel good about that. But I thank God. That's why God has me here. I've had patients who've never had an exposure to anyone Black at all, and so I think I've helped to change some long-held views. I'm very proud of when I can have a patient come back to me. I won't mention his name because of HIPAA, but I just thought he was going to die. I used to do inpatient rehab. I was the medical director of West Campus before it closed down. And he didn't want to go to the hospital. I got down on my knees and said, God, give us the guidance. He went to the hospital, and I really believe God saved him. To this very day, he'll come in with his sons. He's like, you saved my life. I'm like, no, I didn't. God saved your life. Being in Kokomo, being able to practice my entire career here has made me a better Christian, a better man, and a better physician. I've seen everything. I've had ups, I've had downs. I haven't talked about lawsuits, but even those, they happened while I was here. But it still made me a better person. As I transition to my next point, I never would have thought this little Midwestern town would have had such an impact on me. I do not deserve this. I don't. I can think of a couple people I've worked with, people who do things silently that you don't hear about, or who help the homeless, who are active in their churches, who visit the sick. I'm lucky because I just happen to be more visible. Big Black man, earrings, he has an accent. You know what? I got lucky. I'm humbled by it, but I don't deserve it. But I'd be lying if I said I'm not honored to be considered.
When Metta Loretta Christie was born October 2nd, 1895 in Kokomo, Indiana, to parents John F. and Arminda Christie, a school teacher and dressmaker respectively, would anyone have expected her to achieve distinction as a first in the nation's medical history? Probably not, and yet she did. John and Arminda both were descendants of free African Americans who settled in Indiana from Newberry, South Carolina. Metta's father died in 1905, 10 years after her birth, from, according to his death certificate, muscular rheumatism, immediate cause of heart exhaustion. After graduating from Kokomo High School in 1915, Metta left the city in 1917 to study at the Massachusetts College of Osteopathy in Boston, spending her school breaks with her mother in Kokomo. Her mother moved that year from North Union Street to a home that still stands at 917 East Jefferson Street. Metta transferred to the Philadelphia College of Infirmary and Osteopathy to complete her studies, graduating in 1921 as the first African American doctor of osteopathic medicine in the United States. After graduation, Meta lived with her mother until Arminda's death in 1924. Meta herself suffered from a multitude of ailments, as mentioned in the Kokomo Tribune several times from 1913 to 1925, when she had an appendectomy. Her brother Orrin also had an appendectomy at some point, saved by surgery as well. In an article published by the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, historian Carol Benenson-Perloff surmised that all of Meta's own illnesses, combined with her family's poor health, contributed to her drive to become a doctor herself. An article in the Kokomo Tribune dated March 6, 1926, noted that Dr. Meta Christie had accompanied her brother Orrin to his home in Las Vegas, New Mexico. An article in the Albuquerque Journal on April 3, 1929, stated that 5 osteopaths, including Meta, had passed their tests taken before the State Board of Osteopathy in Albuquerque. In her new home, Dr. Christie's practice included African Americans and underprivileged white patients who were not allowed treatment in the local hospital. Renting a room for $20 a month in a boarding house owned by Joseph and Maggie Marable, Dr. Christie treated patients in the same house she resided in. The practice continued for the rest of her career in the same location. Meta served on the board of directors of the New Mexico Osteopathic Medical Association in the 1940s, and in 1955, Meta was one of 4 osteopathic doctors to be awarded a certificate of merit by the organization. The very next year, she was honored with the Distinguished Service Award from the association. Meta passed away in 1968 and was noted by the Las Vegas Optic as a widely known osteopathic physician. In 1995, the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine Student National Medical Association established the Meta L. Christie Award in recognition of exemplary practice in osteopathic medicine, service to the community, and inspiration to future doctors of osteopathic medicine. In 2010, as part of the New Mexico Historic Women Marker Initiative, the New Mexico Historic Preservation Division erected a historic marker about half a mile from her home and practice. In 2021, the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine approved renaming a college residential building to the Meta Christie House and honored Meta with an article in the Digest magazine to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the graduation of Dr. Meta L. Christie, D.O., the first African-American student at Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine and the first African-American doctor of osteopathic medicine in the nation.
My name is Robert A. Lee. I am a retired pastor of Second Missionary Baptist Church, retired in 2013 after 32 years of pastoring. I came here from Indianapolis. I was a minister, staff minister at my home church in youth and education. And I worked at Eli Lilly and Company for 15 years prior to that, and after my stint in the service. Great childhood. We were poor, and of course I didn't know that until I got in the Army and I was grown, and when I saw some of the things that we were doing to help the poor people, and I said, oh, that's us, you know. Grew up in the neighborhood school for at least until the 5th grade, and then I was transferred or sent. This is prior SU Dillon's busing, but I bused with the city bus from my house because it was a special class. I was part of a gifted group. Elementary school, it was George Rogers Clark School #1. Matter of fact, 36th and Gale on the east side of Indianapolis. Graduated from Shortridge High School, and after that enlisted in the military. I was a combat medic, 44th Med Brigade Dragons. Spent my time in Vietnam. I was either in Vietnam or I was training for Vietnam. It was traumatic, very, very traumatic. There are things that I engaged in that I'm not going to tell. Did that, and then when I separated from the service and came back home, and within a month I had a job. and that was at Eli Lilly and Company. After that, I enrolled in, while I was working, I enrolled in Central Baptist Theological Seminary. While I did that, I was also a student at IUPUI. Within a couple of years of my marriage, my wife got pregnant and began raising a family and working in ministry. I met her in Sunday school. I think I was 6 and she was 5. We went to the same church, and our families went to the same church. So that's how we met. We've known each other all our lives, and we interacted that way. Didn't date through high school because she went to one high school I didn't like and was antagonist, and no, we were rivals, Shortridge and Arsenal Technical High School in Indianapolis. My mother was her advocate. She kept me abreast of things that Tina was doing, and kept putting pressure on me. And I can remember her telling me, "Don't play with that girl's affections." So she had my mother. She had my mother on her side my dad too. From that. Basically, we just continued a relationship that I still say it was divine and divinely inspired, and it was providential. My whole life, as I look back over it, I look back now and see where God placed me and used me, even sometimes when I didn't want to be used. I ended up here because the Second Missionary Baptist Church was without a pastor, and they reached out to me and extended the invitation to come to make application to be the pastor, and I did. My kids have 2, Robert and Angela. We decided that 2 great, even to this day, 2 great kids. They're not kids, they're grown. They have kids, and their kids are almost they are grown. So they were very loving, and they were very forgiving of their dad, and because they had the foundation of the faith walk too, and they understand and understood more than I could realize. Didn't realize that a lot till they became grown, and we began to be able to talk like that. I jokingly say I don't like people, but most of the things have been civic. I work with not-for-profits. As a pastor, I work for not-for-profits. As a private individual, I'm not Greek, so I've gone other ways. Church has always been the pivotal thing, and most things have centered there and expanded out there, like when the pebble is thrown in the brook, and those ever concentric circles moving out and moving out. Education has been in the forefront of my life, and a desire to push for excellence and not be satisfied with mediocrity. And that is shown in I made a connection with IUK almost immediately when I got here. Since then, I've made connections with Ivy Tech, the high schools and the grade schools, adopting grade schools. So I've been involved with the educational system. I was police chaplain for over 30 years. And that's, again, some things with people, because they are a distinct group of people. And I enjoyed that ministry. They enjoyed, as far as I know, they enjoyed my input with them. Also had connection with Kokomo Fire Department. That's been one of my fun things, especially in the late 11th Fire Station number 3. I call that and they let me. I call that my engine, because they got that through my efforts in pushing through the Center Township Trustee's office. Center Township, that's another thing where I've served. That's the only thing I've done political. How I've escaped it by just escaping it. When I ran I don't know how much of that. When I ran for the office, my forte, my theme was people before politics. When I retired officially, December 31, 2013, I informed the church a year prior that I was going to do that, but it was after I retired that I ran for office and became Center Township trustee. I am most proud of things that I've done to help people and that I've been blessed to see the results of. I always like to say I want to be another Barnabas, and Barnabas was a son of encouragement. The greatest thing is when kids come back and they're grown and you see where they bless themselves and been blessed to their family, where they've achieved and in whatever venue they choose, because that was a push of mine too. Don't let somebody determine for you what you want to do. You can be all you want to be, but you're gonna have to drive to do it, and repeat over and over again. Don't be satisfied with mediocrity. Stream for excellence, and check out the world and see the world. Expand your worldview. If you don't do what I did better than I did it, then I failed, and I don't want to fail. So that's my best, my greatest achievement, if it can be called that. I'm honored to be asked to accept this award. I don't take it lightly. It was certainly unexpected, and then I went online and I saw some of the others who have been. That's a good class. And this year it's a good class too. All of them, all years a good class, but it's certainly I'm gonna make it a good. I feel like it's a good class because I'm in the class, and I have friends that are in the class. So yeah, it was unexpected. It was unexpected. So yes, I feel honored. I feel blessed, that I was selected, and I'm happy about it. My mantra might be, if I can help somebody as I pass this way, then my living is not in vain. That's not original. That's a spiritual song. But if my chain, if my link can leave an impression, a lasting impression, then I'm happy.
I am Rachel Jenkins. I live in Greentown. I've lived there since 1962. Now I'm retired from all previous activities, but still stay very involved in the community. My husband and I moved to Greentown in 1962. He already had an interest in photography, so we started doing photographs out of our upstairs apartment downtown Greentown. After a while, that became so encompassing that we decided we needed to go full-time. We built a home studio combination at the edge of Greentown. We're very successful, and largely because there wasn't another photographer in Greentown at that time. We shared some responsibilities, but in large ways we split, so that he did the darkroom work and I learned photo coloring, and I was the receptionist and the bookkeeper, and it was just a wonderful meshing of our two interests. I was from the beginning interested in my new home, Greentown, and joined organizations, the Greentown Research Club, and of course Fred and I were active in the local church, and when our children went to school I was active in the PTO, and was just generally interested in everything going on around town. Fred became a Greentown Lion kind of early on, and that's a very significant organization in Greentown. And after a while, I decided that I would like to also be a Lion, and I was one of the first women to do that. Wasn't the very first, but one of the first. And nowadays we have a lot of women in the Greentown Lions. In fact, one just got installed as the president. But back then it was very unusual, and it took the guys a little while to get used to the idea that I was a member. I had been made aware from early days that my family had a rich heritage in American history, going back to just a few years after the Mayflower, not the Mayflower, but a few years after, and we were very proud of that. But I hadn't really done any original research on my own, and it was during the blizzard of 1978 that people who lived through that remember that. We were all homebound, all the roads were closed, and my youngest daughter, Heather, said, "Mom, why don't you get out your genealogy material and see what you can do?" Well, that was the spark that got me going, and I spent several years researching the family as far back as I could. And this was before computers, before cell phones, keep that in mind. And so that meant driving to libraries, Fort Wayne and Indianapolis primarily, driving to courthouses to copy records, driving to cemeteries to take pictures, and I just enjoyed it so much. And what I really garnered from that was how one family kind of encompasses the whole history of the United States. We didn't go as far west as California, but we had frontiersmen, we had farmers, we had tradesmen, we had all of those things, and you don't learn that unless you do the research. The origin of the Greentown grapevine came about because of a realization that we didn't have a good resource for local news. It had been 10 years since we had the Howard County News, which was printed in Greentown, and people would sometimes just offhand say, "Oh, we miss our local newspaper." Well, the opportunity came that a newly formed organization called the Greentown Area Residential Association, which no longer exists, by the way, decided to see if they could get something going. And at the same time, coincidentally, some people in town government were thinking the same thing. So we all kind of got our heads together, and things were a little bit stalled, and old Rachel here decided that she was tired of stalling and did research again at the library and found other local small town newspapers, made calls to editors, said what's involved in putting in a newspaper, because I had no training in the area, and got good advice, and we put out our first issue, and it just took off, and it was a monthly newspaper and covered local events. I will say that I was a stickler for facts. Sometimes people would call me and say, "I just heard," and I didn't print that until I had researched it. The Historical Society actually grew out of the sesquicentennial that we'll talk about in a minute. At the end of the Greentown sesquicentennial, people were saying, "Isn't it a shame that all these objects that have been brought together for us to look at are going to go back to wherever they came from, never to be seen again?" So I proposed the idea that we start a historical society. And the president of the sesquicentennial said she had done so much on that project, and she said, "You know, I'm just ready to sit back for a while, but Rachel, if you want to go for it, go for it." And so I called some people together. The first person was John Harris from the Indiana Historical Society. He came up and talked to us and wanted us to be realistic about what all was involved. But people were excited, and we got it going, and it's still in existence now. And we have exhibits. We have restored 2 buildings. which is our headquarters and place where we store our archives and collections, and I'm just very proud of that accomplishment. But again, it wasn't me alone. There was a big crew behind me that are with me. We were all aware that Howard County and the city of Kokomo was having its sesquicentennial in 1994, right? And Greentown was formed 4 years after that. So we weren't doing anything at that year. And I was in the car one day with the president of the Greentown Town Council and said to him, you know, we should really do something for Greentown. And he said, let's give me some names of who you think might be on that committee. And the two of us got our heads together and came up with a committee of 6. And I am so proud of all the events that we planned for that. Yeah, I've been an advocate for environmental issues, and I've become more involved lately as our knowledge of how we are harming the environment. And I think this grows out of my growing up on a farm and remembering how it was then, and how the wildlife and the insects were so much more plentiful than they are today. And so I have to ask myself, you know, what's going on here? So I contribute to some environmental programs and do what I can personally on my little piece of land. And we have to live with nature. We can't subdue it and survive. So that's what I really believe. I was overwhelmed when I heard that I was nominated. I just couldn't understand why, because I don't have the the resume that so many people do. But I'm so honored, and largely I just thought, well, this is a good thing because it brings attention to Greentown. And Howard County is a wonderful county, and it is dominated by Kokomo, rightly so, for many reasons. But I have been to county meetings when they seem to forget that Greentown and Rushville and all the other smaller communities are out there. So I thought this is a good thing. I will gladly participate in this because it's bringing attention to Greentown and our issues and our strengths.
My name is Sarah Kottner. I am the oldest granddaughter of Don and Naomi Moore. My mother is their middle daughter, Janet. I nominated my grandfather for the Hall of Legends Award because he really did a lot both in the community, locally, in providing prescription medication and health care to the people of Kokomo and the surrounding area, as well as helping to shape policy and practices in community pharmacy nationwide as the president of the National Community Pharmacy Association. Grandpa was born in March of 1931 in French Lick, Indiana. He lived there until high school when his family moved to Kendallville, Indiana, and that's where he met my grandmother, Naomi. They went to high school together, and she followed him to Purdue. They were married and had two of their 3 daughters there. Immediately after graduating from Purdue with his pharmacy degree, he moved to Muncie and worked at Mir Drugs there for about 1.5 years. And when he decided to open his own pharmacy through the Rexall chain, they had 2 options. One was in Kokomo, Indiana, which split the difference in the state between their families. And the other option was out of state. So that's how our family ended up in Kokomo, at least on the maternal side. And they ran the pharmacy here from 1955 until he retired in 2000. And the pharmacy sold to CVS, and my mother and I kept the home medical equipment and supply company as its own, Moore's Home Health and Medical Supply. A few things he did when computers were new to retail pharmacy. In the early 80s, he and a few other of the National Pharmacy Board members really believed passionately that computers were the future of pharmacy for efficiency and accuracy, record keeping and sharing information. And so they went around the country and tried to introduce a lot of local pharmacies to computers and how it could benefit their practice. So I think that was a big thing. He was, if not the first, one of the first pharmacies in Indiana as an independent single loan pharmacy, was keeping all his prescription records on computer in the early 80s. He also had home infusion where he mixed, or his employees mixed home IVs for home nursing agencies to administer. Whether it was antibiotics or when the AIDS epidemic first started, to have home IV medications that people could treat, they were able to get their medication. Grandpa was the president of the Indiana Pharmacy Association. He was also a member of the Howard County Pharmacy Association. In 1994, he became president of the National Association of Retail Druggists, which is now known as the National Community Pharmacy Association. And then he was also president of the National Home Infusion Association. He spent his entire career going to local, state, and national conferences to learn about pharmacy, to network with other pharmacists, and to learn the best he could to improve his pharmacy practice. When he was president, he even traveled internationally, speaking in London and attending a conference in Japan. We did travel a lot as small children with my grandparents. They enjoyed taking us, and the biggest rule was if you could behave in public, then you were allowed to travel along with them. If you acted out in public, you didn't get to go. So we traveled to Florida, Chicago, Las Vegas, and got to learn a lot about networking and continuing education in any industry. And it really helped us see how important it is not just to start off in a certain career, but to continue to learn and develop professionally. It was really important to my grandfather that no one went without medication. So whether a local family didn't have insurance or didn't have enough money to cover their copay, he filled their prescription, and they kept a little shoebox that had a card that listed what people owed. And if they paid great, it might take them a year. They might come in the next week when they got their paycheck. He also made sure that the local pharmacies knew that even though we closed at 10 o'clock at night, if someone needed a prescription to go home, especially a kid, that anyone, if they needed a prescription to go home, get them through the night or through the weekend, they would just call him at home, and he would drive into the store a couple of miles away and fill the prescription and make sure someone was taken care of. Back when we were growing up in the pharmacy, the 24-hour pharmacies weren't a thing. Nobody was open overnight. So we were open 365 days a year. And usually it was family working on holidays. We were there Christmas, Thanksgiving, all the good holidays, but we made it a family celebration. We would have our meals down there together and work through the day, and it was kind of special because so many of the local regular customers would come in either to just stop by and say hello, or because they forgot a present for someone that ended up coming for the holiday, and it became a holiday tradition. And our family was a little out of sorts the first few years after the store closed because we didn't know what to do on holidays. We were usually all together working. My mom, Janet, is a registered nurse. She worked at St. Joe for several years when I was growing up. And Grandpa came to her when I was in elementary school, and home health equipment and medical supplies in the home was an industry that was just really starting to blossom. It was the first time in the mid-70s when you could get home oxygen and hospital beds and that sort of thing. And they had started dabbling in it as as pharmacists, but with Mom's background and experience as a nurse, he asked her if she would be interested in developing it into its own department. which she did. She left the hospital when I was, I believe, in second grade, and she expanded the business and really grew it up into not only its own department, but what could one day become a standalone store. One of the most important things I learned from my grandfather was integrity, both personally, with your family and friends, with your community, but also professionally. He never lied to people. He never tried to overcharge them or bilk them or make a big, huge profit on anything. He was a business owner, so he wanted to make a profit and be able to provide for his family and his kids, but he never wanted to rip anybody off. He treated everyone with respect, even in a time when, in the middle of Indiana, not everyone was treated with respect. He never taught us to look at people differently or judge them because of differences. And he raised his 3 daughters. It may have been different if he'd had a son, but he only had 3 daughters. He raised them to be independent women, to always be able to take care of themselves. You don't need a man to take care of you. If you find one you enjoy, then have a happy life with him, but be able to take care of yourself. And for a man who was born in 1931, that wasn't the norm. So his daughters then passed that on to their own daughters and taught their sons to respect women that same way. And I think that came from respecting his mother. She was a very strong, powerful woman, and she ran their family for sure. But he never treated anybody differently for whatever reason. Even though Grandpa won some national awards, state awards like Sagamore of the Wabash, he was recognized for that. He won some pharmacy awards. He would be really happy to know that he was recognized as a legend of Howard County just because of his community pride. They considered themselves people of Kokomo and people of Howard County, even though they weren't born here. He would really appreciate some of the people that have received the award before. They were people that either were contemporaries of him, people that he was friends with. But he would also be, I think, even more proud that a lot of the things that he did in raising his children and his grandchildren sort of culminated in one of them also getting the award this year, and my brother Ben. He always took a shine to Ben, I think probably because he was the first boy and that was something new. And Ben really learned a lot from him. Learned a lot from both of our parents, but Grandpa taught him a lot, and I think that would make him very proud that he'd passed it on to at least 2 generations forward. And even though he didn't get to meet Ben's kids, he knows that Ben will pass it on to them.
Hi, my name is Ben Kottner, and I'm from Kokomo, Indiana. I now currently live in Seattle, Washington, and I am a producer, director, and film executive. So I was really lucky to have grown up in Kokomo, Indiana, not only because I was surrounded by a fantastic family, but also a great community. I grew up spending, going to great schools. I was a part of the Key program, so I had great teachers like Mrs. Shirley and Mrs. Luttrell and Mrs. Gatman for 6th and 7th grade. That all, it's amazing that those experiences have influenced me to this day. And I also would, after school, go to my grandfather's pharmacy, Moore's Rexall at the time, Moore's drugstore later, but growing up every day, kind of working in the drugstore after school was a really amazing experience. And to have that sense of community and responsibility, and to kind of get to experience the warmth of a town like Kokomo, and to have such access to great education and community was a powerful influence in my life. Those experiences really stayed with me. Being able to have a school that would teach the sort of Greek and Latin derivatives of words was, I think a lot of kids don't have access to that kind of education. And then working with my family and being in an independent business, really instilled with me a sense of responsibility, of caring about the community. My grandparents, as well as the rest of my family, always had a sense of really trying to help out, and it really felt like it was a gathering place where people would come to hang out and support one another. I fortunately was given the opportunity to go to Culver Military Academy for my first 2 years of high school. And that was an incredible experience. It's one of the best high schools in the world and not too far from Kokomo. So I spent 2 years there. And then I transferred after Culver to the Indiana Academy for Math, Science, and Humanities, which is at Ball State University. And I finished out high school there, which is an incredible sort of advanced placement course where you're taking classes largely with college professor, so it really prepares you for going on to college afterwards. So after Indiana Academy, I applied to and was admitted to Pitzer College, which is in Southern California. And there I was able to study a whole range of things and really figure out what it was that I was passionate about. And at the time, I chose media studies as my major, which kind of gave me an entry point to the film and entertainment industries. Being close to Los Angeles, there were a lot of opportunities for me to do internships there. So I was exposed to something that I didn't know was an option in terms of careers. Growing up in Indiana, it's not something that you usually have a lot of exposure to. So I was fortunate to be able to have that kind of experience during my college years. And that really inspired me to pursue the path that I did, getting into film and television. So after college and having been exposed to some internships in the film and entertainment industry, I was really fortunate to get one of my first really full-time jobs, which was at Paramount Pictures. And at the time, they had an art house division called Paramount Classics that released a lot of really great art house films and foreign language films. And it was in an industry called acquisitions. And film acquisitions, again, it's not something that you really learn about in school, but there is an entire career dedicated to going around the world and attending film festivals and getting to see some of the best films in the world and try to help the ones that you really like get distribution. And so I was doing that for Paramount Pictures. And so it allowed me to, for 10 years, really travel the world and get to see a different side of the film industry that you usually see in more mainstream films, and get to expose be exposed to the cutting edge, the up and coming crop of filmmakers that are just coming out of places like Sundance Film Festival. And so it really taught me a lot about both the artistic side of film and about the business side of film. I've been really lucky to have a career that's evolved so I've been involved in a lot of different roles throughout my career, and what really has motivated me every step of the way has been a joy that I have from seeing the impact that the work that I can do on the world. And if you're able to make a film or a television show that really inspires people or educates people, it can go a long way and you can reach really big audiences. So for me, that intersection of making things where people can learn from and that they're entertained by has been a motivating factor for me every step of the way. And that really was certainly the case when I directed the film The Case Against 8, which taught people a lot about the gay marriage lawsuit that was going to the Supreme Court. It inspired me when I worked on distributing the film An Inconvenient Truth, which taught people about education. And it inspired me when I was an executive working on a film like The 13th, which was directed by Ava DuVernay, which tackled a lot of issues about mass incarceration and criminal justice. And so these films were able to be seen by millions and millions of people and really sparked a dialogue. And now I carry that with me now that I'm the head of creative for Masterclass, which is a platform entirely dedicated to continuing and advancing learning in our society through really entertaining programming. So it's something that has constantly been a thread throughout my career. So I currently live just outside of Seattle, Washington. My husband and I just moved here from Los Angeles, where we'd spent the last 25 years. So this is new for us. My husband is a writer. He's worked on a lot of television shows that you might have seen. And we are very lucky to have 2 kids. Our son, Marshall, is turning 2 next week, and our daughter, Cascadia, will be 3 in September. Can't say enough about how incredibly supportive my family has been for me in many different ways, whether it's through education and making sure that I got access to a great education, supporting me and my family as we've grown. Also being exposed to leaders in the community, such as my grandfather, and the way that he participated not just in things in Kokomo, but the way that he participated on a national level of trying to help independent businesses through his work with the National Community Pharmacists Association was something that I got to travel with them and experience what they were doing and see what that kind of profession and what that kind of dedication could mean in a career. And so seeing that from a young age was an inspiration. And my grandmother, who was also a big part of the business and of the work that he was doing, and how the two of them worked together, and how that kind of a partnership could work in life, has certainly inspired me. But my parents, my mom, Janet, my dad, John, just in every step of the way have been a complete support, and I've always known that they are there for me, and that more than anything, I think has allowed me to kind of spread my wings, so to speak, and to have my brother and sister, Jonathan and Sarah, by my side, my cousins. We grew up very close together. We would spend weekends up at Lake Manitou, and having that kind of family support and network was an incredible part of my life, and I'm really grateful to all of them.